Kale had never seen a palace like this. Towering spires of polished crystal reached toward the sky, catching the light of 3 suns and scattering it in 1,000 colors across the landing field. Ships of all shapes and sizes hummed and floated through the air, carrying envoys, traders, and diplomats from worlds Kale had only studied in books. Despite the brilliance, there was a tense quiet in the air, a subtle wariness in the movements of the palace guards and attendants. He adjusted the hood of his robe and took a deep breath. Every step he took was watched, every gesture measured. Here, one wrong move could spell disaster. He reminded himself of his mission. The human empire was small, fragile, and largely unknown across these distant stars, but Kale had been sent on a task far greater than any simple diplomacy. He was to learn about the alien empire ruled by Queen Leora, a civilization of unmatched technology and intelligence, and if possible, to find a way for humanity to be recognized as more than mere myths among the stars. He could not fail. The entrance to the palace opened with a quiet hiss, revealing a vast hall bathed in soft blue light. Kale's eyes swept over the alien architecture. Walls that seemed to shift and breathe, columns that spiraled impossibly high, and floors that reflected not just the people walking on them but faint visions of stars and galaxies beyond. It was a place of wonders, of intelligence so advanced it almost hurt to look at it too long. Kale's heart raced, but he forced his steps forward. A group of attendants approached, their elongated forms and luminous eyes assessing him with clinical precision. Kale offered a respectful bow, careful not to make any gestures that might betray his human origins. The robes he wore, a standard diplomatic uniform borrowed from the alien court, hid much of his appearance, but it could not erase the subtle differences, the rhythm of his movements, the warmth in his expression, the human hesitation in his stance. He sensed that they noticed, and that knowledge both worried and fascinated him. "Welcome, visitor," said a voice that was soft yet commanding. It came from one of the attendants, but Kale had the feeling the words carried weight far beyond the speaker. "The Queen is aware of your arrival. She will receive you shortly." Yet nothing could have prepared him for the sheer presence of the place, or the unspoken weight of the Queen's gaze, even though she had not yet appeared. He was led through a series of corridors that twisted and turned in ways that defied simple geometry. Every doorway, every window, every piece of furniture seemed designed to test perception and intelligence. Kale's mind worked quickly, cataloging patterns and understanding the subtle logic behind the designs. Humans were small in the grand scale of the galaxy, but they had a strength no machine or alien algorithm could predict: adaptability. He reminded himself of that strength now, quietly, as he followed the attendants. Finally, they arrived at a set of wide doors that opened to reveal a room of breathtaking beauty. It was circular, with a high dome that glimmered like liquid crystal. At the center, seated upon a throne that seemed to float slightly above the floor, was Queen Leora herself. She was taller than most humans Kale had seen, her skin a luminous silver, her eyes reflecting galaxies as if they contained entire worlds within them. Her presence was magnetic, yet not oppressive. She radiated intelligence, curiosity, and authority all at once. Kale took a careful step forward, bowing as low as he dared without risking offense. The Queen's gaze shifted toward him, and for a moment he felt as though she could see not only his body but his thoughts, his memories, his very essence. He swallowed hard and straightened. "Your Majesty," he said, voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline. "I am Kale, representing humanity." That was an understatement. Humans were nearly legendary in this empire. Tales of their ingenuity, courage, and unpredictability had traveled across systems for centuries, yet no human had ever arrived in person. No human had ever stood before Queen Leora. He followed her subtle hand gesture, signaling him to rise fully and approach. Each step he took was careful, measured, yet natural. He could feel the eyes of the court upon him, some curious, some skeptical, some outright hostile. Kale's heart thudded, but he held himself steady. Human beings thrived under pressure. It was in their nature to face the impossible and find solutions others could not imagine. "Tell me," the Queen said, her gaze piercing yet inquisitive, "what drives your people to reach across the stars? What is it about humans that compels them to seek knowledge, to survive against odds that would destroy others? We survive because we adapt, because we care for one another, and because we believe that understanding the universe is worth every risk. We are small, but our will is large. We seek to learn, not just to conquer, to create, not just to consume." For a brief moment, Kale thought she might see through him completely. Perhaps she did. Humans were not perfect, they were flawed, impulsive, emotional, yet that very imperfection was what made them remarkable. A subtle smile touched her lips. Your words resonate. Perhaps there is more to humans than the old records suggest. She extended a hand, delicate and warm. Kale instinctively bowed again, and when his hand met hers, there was a strange spark, not of electricity, but of recognition. He did not understand it fully, but the Queen's touch seemed to convey understanding, history, and acknowledgement all at once. His heart raced. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended species. Walk with me, the Queen said, rising gracefully from her throne. There is much to show you, much to learn, and perhaps in time you will understand why we have waited for your arrival. They moved through corridors lined with artifacts from countless civilizations, each one a testament to the Empire's mastery of science, art, and philosophy. Yet in all this grandeur, there was a subtle focus on Kale, a sense that the Queen was measuring, learning, and in a way recognizing something deeply familiar in him. They entered a garden unlike any Kale had seen. Plants with crystalline leaves shimmered in the light, flowers glowed softly from within, and the air was filled with a gentle hum that seemed almost musical. The Queen paused near a fountain that reflected not only their images but faint glimpses of distant stars. You see, she said, even in beauty there is purpose. Observation and understanding are the foundations of life, of progress. Tell me, Kale, can your people see the same patterns in the chaos of the universe? Then perhaps your arrival is no accident. Perhaps the universe has waited long enough for humanity to take its place among the stars. Kale would need to prove himself, not only to the Queen, but to an entire civilization. He would need to show that humanity's unique strengths were worth the risk of trust. As they walked, the Queen's hand brushed against his again, lightly, almost casually. Yet Kale felt the weight of it, the acknowledgement that she recognized him in ways the rest of the court might not. For a fleeting moment, he felt less like an outsider and more like someone who belonged, someone whose presence mattered in a universe so vast and unfamiliar. And for the first time, Kale understood that his mission was no longer just about diplomacy or gathering knowledge. It was about demonstrating humanity itself, its creativity, its courage, its resilience, and perhaps in doing so earning a place in the legacy of the stars. The palace loomed behind them, a symbol of power and centuries of history, but Kale's gaze remained on the Queen, on the way her eyes held a flicker of understanding, on the subtle way her touch seemed to speak volumes. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with intrigue and challenges that could test the limits of human endurance. Yet Kale felt a spark of hope. If the Queen had sensed even a fraction of humanity's essence in him, perhaps there was a chance. A chance not just for himself, but for his people. And with that thought, Kale stepped forward, fully aware that the real journey, the one that could define humanity's place among the stars, was only just beginning. Kale walked beside the Queen, his senses alert to every movement, every glance from the courtiers around them. The palace was alive with whispers. He could feel it, eyes following, speculation in the air. Some of the alien attendants were polite, some curious, and a few seemed openly wary. Kale knew that his human nature made him unpredictable in their eyes. That unpredictability could be dangerous, but it could also be his greatest strength. The Queen led him through a series of halls filled with artifacts from countless civilizations. Each object shimmered with light or energy in ways Kale could barely comprehend. He moved carefully, touching nothing unless invited, all the while studying the patterns and designs. Humans had always survived in strange worlds by observing, by noticing details others ignored. Here, in this palace of impossible architecture, that skill felt like a lifeline. Your people are small, the Queen said, her voice calm but carrying weight. Yet their reach spreads far. How do humans manage to survive, to achieve, when so many civilizations have failed? Sometimes it means taking paths others would never imagine. We are not the strongest, but we are persistent. Something that belongs to your kind. The Queen stopped at a large observation window overlooking a city that sparkled beneath three suns. Towers and bridges curved in impossible arcs, and flying vehicles zipped through the sky in precise patterns. It was a civilization of order, of intelligence beyond comprehension. Yet Kale could see imperfections in the systems, small details that a human mind might notice and understand. Do you see it? The Queen asked. The flow, the patterns, the small deviations, many of my people would overlook them, yet you notice. For a moment, Kale felt as though she could read his very thoughts. He sensed curiosity, but also caution. There was something she was testing, something she needed to understand before revealing it fully. They moved again, this time into a garden unlike any Kale had seen before. Crystalline plants glowed faintly in the light, and the air vibrated with a soft hum almost musical. Alien creatures of all shapes moved among the foliage, some floating, some walking, all observing silently. Kale's eyes scanned everything. Even in this extraordinary place, there were small details others might miss. The way a plant's light pulsed in rhythm with its neighbor, the subtle signals of the creatures, patterns in the hum of energy that ran through the garden. "You are observant," the queen said, as though reading his thoughts. "Most visitors overlook these things, yet your kind you notice. Tell me, Kale, is observation a skill or instinct for humans? Even small observations can change everything." It was that spark that had allowed them to survive wars, disasters, and countless challenges across history. And Kale, standing here in this alien palace, felt that spark within himself as he had never felt it before. As they walked, the queen stopped near a fountain whose waters shimmered with faint starlight. She gestured toward it. "Touch it if you wish. Many avoid direct contact. Yet I have a feeling you will understand what it offers." It was as if the fountain contained knowledge of the stars themselves, yet it responded to understanding and intention, not force. "You feel it," the queen said softly. "Most cannot, but you do. That is why you are here. That is why I have waited." There was recognition in her tone, a confirmation that went beyond explanation. Something about his presence resonated with her in a way he could not yet articulate. The hum of the garden was suddenly interrupted by movement from the shadows. A group of attendants approached, their faces tense. Kale sensed immediate suspicion. He had learned to read such signals. There was trouble brewing. "Your Majesty," one of the attendants said quickly, "there is a matter of protocol. The Outer Council demands that the visitor's identity be verified fully. There are concerns." "Concerns are natural," she said calmly, addressing the attendants. "But Kale's presence here is deliberate. His identity is known to me, even if it is not yet clear to all. Trust is built with observation, not suspicion." Humans had always thrived in situations where others underestimated them, using wit and courage to survive. That skill would be tested here, and he was ready. The queen turned back to him, a subtle touch on his shoulder as they moved through the garden. It was brief, almost casual, yet Kale felt it deep in his chest. There was a sense of recognition, a silent acknowledgement that he understood far more than any other visitor. He did not fully know what it meant, but it strengthened his resolve. They continued through the palace, and Kale began to notice patterns in the interactions of the court. Some officials watched him closely, others whispered among themselves. He could sense who was curious, who was cautious, and who might be hostile. Humans excelled in reading others, in understanding subtle cues. Kale used that skill now, observing, listening, and learning. The queen led him to a chamber filled with devices he could barely comprehend. Machines hummed and glowed, measuring energies and forces that humans had only dreamed of understanding. Yet Kale noticed small flaws, small patterns that hinted at principles humans could grasp. His mind worked quickly, connecting the dots, understanding relationships that might elude even the most advanced alien minds. "You are thinking," the queen said, her voice almost a whisper, "and I see it. Your mind is different, Kale. It seeks connections where others see only data. That is the essence of humanity. That is why you are here." The queen gestured toward a table filled with maps, artifacts, and devices. "Show me what your people would do with this knowledge. Show me how humans think, how humans adapt." He proposed solutions that no alien mind had suggested, combining observation, creativity, and foresight. The queen listened, her eyes glinting with approval and curiosity. "You are more remarkable than the records suggested," she said finally. "Perhaps the universe has underestimated humans all along." It was more than praise. It was recognition, understanding, and the first hint that he was being seen for what he truly was. Humans were small in the galaxy, but they carried strengths others overlooked. Here, in this palace of wonders, Kale realized that humanity had a chance, not just to survive, but to leave a mark that could endure across stars. As the evening light of the suns dimmed, casting long shadows through the crystal halls, Kale knew the next steps would be even more challenging. The court was full of eyes and minds that would test him, that would scrutinize every action. But he also knew that he had an ally, someone who recognized the essence of humanity in him. That knowledge gave him strength. The queen's touch had said it all. She had recognized him not just as a visitor, but as a human, as someone capable of thought, courage, and creativity that even her empire had not fully anticipated. It was a subtle connection, quiet yet profound, and it marked the beginning of something greater. Kale straightened his posture, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Humans had always faced impossible odds and had always found a way to endure. Here, in the heart of an alien empire, that same spirit would guide him. The Queen's subtle recognition was only the first step, but it was enough to ignite the determination that had brought him across galaxies. And so, Kale walked forward, fully aware that the eyes of an entire civilization were upon him, and fully determined to prove that humanity's light, small but fierce, could shine in even the most distant corners of the universe. Kale awoke before the twin suns rose fully over the horizon, the pale light spilling across the crystal walls of his chamber. Sleep had been restless. His mind was alive with thoughts of the palace, the queen, and the strange recognition that had passed between them. Humans often dreamt of challenges before facing them, and Kale's dreams were no different. But he also felt a spark of excitement. The queen's acknowledgement, subtle as it had been, told him that his presence here mattered. More than that, it suggested the beginning of something larger, something that could shape humanity's future among the stars. Breakfast in the palace was unlike anything Kale had ever experienced. The table was set with crystalline vessels containing substances that glowed faintly, emitting scents and tastes that were both strange and oddly familiar. Courtiers moved silently around the dining hall, their movements precise and deliberate, yet Kale noticed patterns others might miss. The pauses, the way energy shifted subtly between individuals, and the quiet signals of observation they sent to one another. The queen joined him shortly after he had seated himself, her silver robes glinting in the soft light. She did not speak immediately, instead observing him as he sampled the offerings. Kale returned the gaze with steady eyes, careful not to show the mixture of awe and nervousness he felt. Humans were often underestimated for their size, their appearance, their physical limitations, but they possessed something more powerful: resilience, perception, and adaptability. He would rely on these qualities in the hours to come. "You slept well?" she asked finally, her voice calm and melodic. It carried the weight of authority, but also a subtle curiosity. "Rested enough," Kale replied, "though the palace and its wonders make sleep a challenge. It is what lies beneath them, the essence of thought, of intelligence, that matters. I need to understand that essence in you, Kale. Your people are small, fragile in many ways, yet you carry a spark. I wish to see it in action." He suspected the queen's words were the prelude to some form of examination, a test that would determine not only his abilities, but the way the empire would view humanity. After breakfast, he was led through a labyrinth of halls and chambers that he had not seen the day before. Each room seemed designed to challenge perception, to test attention to detail. In one, a series of geometric puzzles shifted in midair, their shapes changing constantly. In another, energy flows needed to be redirected through channels that responded to subtle movements and choices. Kale observed carefully, noticing patterns and solutions that were not immediately obvious. Humans often excelled in thinking creatively when logic alone failed. That skill, he realized, was precisely what the queen was seeking. "You approach problems differently than my people," she remarked. "You do not rely solely on calculation, yet your solutions are effective. You notice what others do not. That is the essence of humanity. It is both a strength and a risk." "Our survival depends on noticing things others overlook," he said. "We learn from mistakes. We adapt. Sometimes that is enough to overcome challenges that seem impossible. Prepare yourself, Kale. Today you will not only observe, you will participate." The queen gestured toward a device projecting a simulation of a planetary system, with streams of energy and orbiting bodies moving in intricate patterns. "Your task," the queen said, "is to stabilize this system. It is in chaos, and traditional calculations alone cannot solve it. You may use whatever methods you see fit, but it must be done accurately and efficiently. Observe, think, and act." He examined the holographic simulation, noticing small inconsistencies in energy flow that suggested hidden relationships between the planets. "Humans rely on intuition," he murmured, almost to himself. "We observe patterns and act before we have full data. Sometimes that is the only way forward." His species had survived catastrophes and wars far larger than this simulation, using intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. Minutes passed, Streams of energy shifted and stabilized. The holographic system aligned, flowing in perfect harmony. A faint hum filled the chamber as the Queen's devices registered the success. She approached him, eyes glowing faintly with approval. "You adapt," she said. "You notice, you think beyond the obvious. That is why you are remarkable. That is why I have waited for humanity to appear in my court." Humans were small, fragile in many ways, yet they carried a spark that even this advanced empire could not ignore. As the day continued, Kale faced more challenges, each designed to test different facets of thought, perception, and creativity. In one chamber, he deciphered alien symbols that encoded complex sequences of energy pulses. In another, he solved a logistical problem involving supply chains across multiple planetary colonies. Each success drew subtle nods and gestures of approval from the Queen, and each time her hand brushed against his, he felt a sense of recognition that was difficult to describe. The court was observing closely. Some were curious, some skeptical, and a few whispered that the human might be a threat. Kale noticed these undercurrents, as humans often did, reading not just words but expressions, subtle cues, and the energy of the room. Understanding people, or aliens in this case, was as important as understanding the challenges before him. Humans survived not just through intellect, but through empathy, perception, and the ability to adapt to unpredictable situations. By mid-afternoon, Kale was led to a private chamber with only the Queen present. The walls were lined with shelves containing artifacts from distant worlds. Some were scientific, some artistic, all reflecting civilizations that had risen and fallen over millennia. "Now," the Queen said, "we speak not of simulations or problems but of understanding. Tell me, Kale, what is it about humans that allows them to endure against such odds? What is their strength that others lack?" They had built civilizations, explored oceans, and reached the stars despite limitations that would have crushed other species. "Our strength," he said finally, "is in our ability to learn, to adapt, and to care. We notice details others miss, we take risks others avoid, and we persevere when hope seems lost. We are small, fragile, but we endure because we refuse to give up. It allows us to create, to innovate, to find solutions others cannot see. It is a risk, yes, but it is also a gift. Without it, we would not survive, we would not progress. That is why your presence is not accidental. That is why humanity, despite its size and fragility, has a place in the stars." The Queen had seen it in him, understood it, and acknowledged it in a way that transcended words. As the afternoon faded into evening, Kale reflected on the day's experiences. Each challenge had tested him, but also revealed the core of what it meant to be human: observation, creativity, empathy, resilience, and courage. Even in a civilization as advanced as this, these qualities had made an impression, had earned recognition, and had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. The Queen led him back through the garden, where crystalline plants glowed softly in the fading light. She paused near the fountain, her hand touching his lightly. "You have proven more than skill, Kale. You have demonstrated essence. Remember this feeling. It will guide you through the days ahead. There are more challenges, more trials, and more people who will doubt you. But remember this, humanity's spark is stronger than it appears." Court intrigue, rival factions, and the complexities of an alien civilization would test him continuously. Yet he felt stronger, more certain of his purpose. He had a gift to show, a legacy to represent, and the acknowledgement of someone whose judgment mattered across the galaxy. As he returned to his chambers that evening, Kale allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Humans were often underestimated. They were small, fragile, and flawed, yet they endured, they adapted, they created, they survived. And in this palace, under the subtle recognition of Queen Leora, Kale realized that humanity's potential was limitless. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and perhaps new dangers, but Kale was ready. He had shown the spark that made his species extraordinary, and now he would continue to prove it, step by step, touch by touch, challenge by challenge. Humanity had begun to shine in the eyes of the stars, and Kale knew that the Queen's subtle acknowledgement was only the beginning. There were greater revelations to come, alliances to form, and truths to uncover. But one thing was certain: humanity's light, small but resilient, had begun to make its mark in a universe that had long underestimated it. The palace was quieter in the early hours of the morning, but Kale could feel the tension in the air as he walked through the long corridors. The court had begun to watch him more closely. Rumors whispered among attendants, and scholars reached his ears in fragments. Some spoke of human ingenuity, others of danger and unpredictability. Kale reminded himself that every gaze, every murmur was a test of his composure. Humans had survived far greater scrutiny than this, often using intelligence and patience to prevail. The queen awaited him in a chamber deeper within the palace than any he had yet visited. The walls shimmered with a faint energy, projecting images of distant planets and stars, as though the entire universe was contained within the room. A soft hum resonated in the space, a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with thought and intention. Kale stepped forward carefully, observing everything. "Today," the queen said, her voice calm but sharp, "I will see how you act when the stakes are not only intellectual but practical. You have impressed with observation and thought, but now I wish to test your adaptability, your intuition, and your capacity for leadership." "I am ready, Your Majesty," he replied, keeping his voice steady. The queen gestured toward a holographic table in the center of the room. It projected a series of connected worlds, each with unique resources, climates, and populations. The projection shifted constantly, simulating environmental changes, political unrest, and unpredictable disasters. "These are my territories," she explained. "One of your tasks is to prevent collapse, to stabilize systems, and to ensure that all inhabitants thrive. You may not control every factor directly, but your decisions must influence the outcomes." Yet humans had a gift the queen had already noted: the ability to see patterns in chaos, to anticipate connections others overlooked, to adapt in real time. Kale allowed that skill to guide him. He began with observation, noting which planets were most at risk and how small changes in energy flows or resource allocation could stabilize entire regions. He suggested subtle interventions, guiding trade routes, energy streams, and population shifts. Each action was deliberate but creative, using intuition as much as calculation. Humans often relied on both, and it gave them an edge in unpredictable circumstances. The queen observed silently, her eyes following every decision. Occasionally, her hand brushed against Kale's shoulder or arm as she moved past, a small touch that conveyed something he could not yet fully interpret: recognition, approval, curiosity. Each time, Kale felt a surge of understanding. Her gestures were subtle, but their meaning was clear. She saw him not just as a visitor, but as someone capable of influencing the course of events. Minutes became hours as Kale adjusted the systems. Small disasters were averted, populations stabilized, and resources balanced in ways that were effective yet unexpected. Some attendants whispered among themselves, astonished at the humans' insight. Others remained skeptical, but Kale ignored them. Humans had learned to work in uncertainty, to persist even when doubt surrounded them. "Your approach is unconventional," the queen said at last, stepping closer. "Yet it works. You have stabilized systems that my advisors could not, and you did so with minimal direct control. That is human adaptability in action. Humans have endured because we see connections others overlook, because we take calculated risks. Let us see if you possess them as well." Humans excelled in such moments, relying on intuition, empathy, and quick thinking. Kale analyzed the situation, identifying critical nodes that could stabilize the region. He issued directives to local administrators within the simulation, suggested strategic adjustments to resource flows, and anticipated movements of the rebellious factions. The system responded dynamically to his actions. Minute by minute, the chaos subsided, the population stabilized, and the rebellion was contained without widespread destruction. The queen's lips curved slightly. "Remarkable," she said. "You act decisively, yet with consideration. You value both efficiency and preservation. That balance is rare, and it is the essence of effective leadership." Humans had survived wars and disasters not because they were strongest, but because they combined courage, adaptability, and moral intuition. That same principle guided him now. The queen stepped closer, her hand brushing his again, a gesture that seemed to carry layers of meaning. Kale felt it deep in his chest, a signal of recognition that went beyond words. She did not merely acknowledge his actions, she acknowledged his essence. Humans were small, fragile, and often underestimated, yet they carried qualities that even the most advanced civilizations could not ignore. "Walk with me," the queen said, leading him to a balcony overlooking the city below. The view was breathtaking. Towers spiraled in impossible arcs, energy flows glimmered across the sky, and the city thrived under the watchful structures of the empire. "Observe, Kale. Even in perfection there are lessons. Even in control, there is opportunity for growth." Small adjustments can have large effects over time. It is not size or strength. It is perception, intuition, and the courage to act when others hesitate. The test was subtle yet complex. A simulated natural disaster threatened multiple planetary regions simultaneously. Resources were limited, populations panicked, and timing was critical. Kale analyzed patterns, prioritized interventions, and acted decisively, guiding populations to safety and reallocating resources dynamically. Minute by minute, the system responded to his actions. What seemed impossible moments before gradually stabilized. The Queen's voice broke the quiet. You are persistent, perceptive, and capable of leadership under pressure. These qualities alone set humanity apart. And yet, she paused, her hand brushing lightly against his arm, there is more I must understand. Not only your skill, but your essence, your spirit, and your capacity to act morally and wisely under scrutiny. The afternoon passed in a flurry of simulations and exercises, each designed to test a different facet of his abilities. Kale responded with calm precision, intuition, and strategic thinking. He noticed patterns others missed, anticipated consequences, and acted decisively. The Queen observed silently, occasionally stepping closer to brush his shoulder or arm, a subtle gesture that communicated understanding, recognition, and encouragement. By the time the suns began to set, Kale felt both exhaustion and exhilaration. He had passed each test not through raw power or alien technology, but through qualities intrinsic to humanity: observation, creativity, adaptability, courage, and moral consideration. The Queen's subtle touches, her words, and her gaze told him that she recognized these qualities, that she understood the essence of what he represented. As they returned to the chambers, Kale reflected on the day. The palace was a place of immense intelligence, power, and history, yet humans had a spark that could not be replicated by technology or experience alone. That spark, resilience, adaptability, and moral insight, had earned him recognition from the Queen. And in that recognition lay both a responsibility and an opportunity to demonstrate humanity's value not just in simulations but in the real universe among the stars. The Queen paused at the entrance to his chambers. Her eyes held his, glowing faintly with acknowledgement. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, Kale. You have proven skill and insight, but the court will watch even more closely. Some may doubt, some may attempt to undermine you. Remember what you have shown me. Remember the essence of humanity. Kale felt the weight of it, a quiet confirmation that his actions, his choices, and his essence mattered. Humans were small in this galaxy, often underestimated, yet they carried qualities that could change perceptions, influence civilizations, and survive where others might fail. As Kale settled into his chambers that evening, he realized the full scope of the challenge before him. The court would continue to observe, test, and scrutinize him. Rival factions would notice his abilities, perhaps resent them. But he also understood the strength of the recognition he had earned from the Queen. It was subtle yet profound. She had seen him, not just as a visitor, but as a human, a representative of his species, capable of thought, action, and leadership. Kale allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Humanity was often underestimated. Humans were small, imperfect, and fragile, yet they endured. They adapted. They thrived. And now, under the subtle acknowledgement of Queen Leora, Kale understood that their spark could shine even in the most distant and advanced corners of the galaxy. He would face further trials, challenges that would test his intellect, courage, and moral judgment. But Kale felt ready. He had shown the Queen what humanity could do, not through force or technology, but through the qualities that defined his species. Observation, creativity, intuition, courage, and adaptability. They were the essence of humans, and they had earned him recognition in a court that few outsiders had ever entered. And Kale knew, as he prepared for the next day, that the Queen's subtle acknowledgement was not just encouragement, it was a promise. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was also an opportunity to prove humanity's worth, to demonstrate that even the smallest species could leave a lasting mark on the stars. Kale closed his eyes, letting the quiet of the palace sink in, and allowed himself to feel a surge of determination. The challenges ahead would not break him. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and he would carry that spirit forward. Humanity's spark, small but brilliant, had begun to shine here in the heart of an alien empire, and Kale would make sure it continued to burn brightly, no matter the trials that awaited. The morning sun painted the palace in hues of gold and silver, casting long shadows across the crystal halls. Kale moved carefully through the corridors, every step measured, yet confident. Today would be different. He could feel it in the energy of the court, in the subtle glances of attendants, and in the quiet hum that seemed to follow him wherever he went. There was anticipation in the air, tension that threaded through every interaction. The time had come for his presence, his decisions, and his essence to be fully acknowledged, not just by the queen, but by the court itself. He entered the grand hall, a space larger than any he had seen. Towers of polished crystal spiraled toward the ceiling, and sunlight fractured across the floor in dazzling patterns. Nobles, scholars, and attendants had gathered, their attention focused on the queen who stood at the center, her presence commanding and luminous. Kale noticed the subtle tension in their expressions. Whispers spread quickly. The human who had impressed the queen was here, and some feared him while others were curious. The queen's gaze found Kale immediately. She smiled faintly, a mixture of approval and anticipation. "Kale," she said, her voice calm but resonant, "you have faced tests of intellect, adaptability, and leadership. You have proven skill, creativity, and judgment. But now all eyes are upon you. Today, the court will see what I have already recognized, the essence of humanity." Humans thrived in moments of observation and pressure. They endured, adapted, and acted with clarity when circumstances demanded it. Today, that clarity would be tested more than ever. A hush fell over the hall as the queen signaled attendants to bring forward the holographic projection of the Empire's sectors. Streams of energy, planetary colonies, and population networks glimmered above the floor. Several key sectors were highlighted in red, indicating instability or potential crisis. Rival factions within the court murmured among themselves, their voices sharp with concern and skepticism. Some openly doubted that a human, small and unfamiliar, could influence the outcome of such complex systems. The queen gestured toward Kale. "Stabilize the system, prevent collapse, demonstrate not only your skill but the qualities that I have already recognized. Show the court what it is that makes your people unique." He noticed subtle correlations that others had missed, energy flows that could be redirected, resource streams that could be optimized, and alliances among planetary administrators that could be strengthened with guidance. Humans had survived and thrived not through brute force, but through observation, intuition, and connection. He would use all three. Minutes passed as Kale issued directives, adjusted flows, and subtly influenced the outcomes of the simulation. The court watched, some with open skepticism, others with wide-eyed curiosity. Kale remained calm, letting his instincts guide him. Humans excelled at turning complexity into opportunity, and he relied on that strength now. A sudden surge of instability appeared in one of the highlighted sectors, a rebellion fueled by scarcity and miscommunication. The holographic population showed panic spreading rapidly. Kale's pulse quickened. He knew that even a small misstep could undermine his credibility, but he also knew the strengths that humans possessed: ingenuity, adaptability, and empathy. He acted quickly, redirecting critical resources, sending calming messages through administrators, and anticipating the movement of key populations. The rebellion's energy subsided gradually, streams of power realigned, and the sector stabilized. The queen's eyes glinted with acknowledgement. A faint smile curved her lips as she stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against Kale's shoulder, a subtle but weighty gesture of recognition. "Remarkable," she said softly, her voice carrying over the hall. "You act decisively, yet with consideration. That is leadership in its truest form." Humans, small and underestimated, carry qualities that cannot be measured by size or technology alone. Now in this moment, humanity's spark shone clearly. The murmurs in the hall shifted. Some skeptics still whispered, but curiosity began to overtake doubt. A few attendants approached, seeking guidance, their eyes betraying hope rather than suspicion. Kale realized that his presence, his actions, and his approach had begun to change perceptions. Humans were no longer myths. They were living proof of resilience, creativity, and intelligence. The queen's gaze held his. "There is one more step," she said. "The court will now see what I already know. Kale, you may reveal your true identity." The concept of a human, standing in the center of the Empire's grand hall capable of such insight, was almost unimaginable. Kale took a deep breath. He straightened, standing tall despite his smaller frame. "I am Kale of Earth," he said clearly. "I represent humanity, a species often underestimated but capable of great ingenuity, resilience, and moral judgment. Today, I have acted not as an outsider, but as a demonstration of what humans can offer, not only in intelligence or strategy, but in the capacity to adapt, observe, and act with purpose. Recognition, approval, trust, every element of acknowledgement was conveyed in that single touch. The court understood immediately this was no ordinary envoy. This was a human, recognized fully by the queen and deserving of respect. Whispers turned into murmurs of curiosity, then into open acknowledgement. Scholars began discussing the implications of Kale's strategies, administrators nodded in agreement with his interventions, and even some of the skeptical factions observed quietly, reconsidering their assumptions. Humanity's essence, the combination of creativity, adaptability, courage, and moral insight, was now undeniable. The queen addressed the court, her voice carrying authority and clarity. You have witnessed skill, ingenuity, and leadership. But above all, you have witnessed the qualities that define humanity: perception, adaptability, empathy, and courage. Let this moment remind you that greatness is not measured by size, strength, or technology alone, but by the spirit, insight, and resilience of those who act. Recognition from the queen was significant, but acknowledgement by the entire court was transformative. Humans were no longer distant myths or curiosities. They were beings capable of shaping events, influencing civilizations, and surviving against unimaginable odds. As the ceremony concluded, the queen led Kale aside to a private balcony overlooking the palace city. The view was breathtaking. Energy flows glimmered across the sky, towers stretched impossibly high, and the inhabitants moved in harmony with the rhythms of the empire. Kale felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him, yet he also felt a sense of exhilaration. "You have proven more than skill today," the queen said, her hand brushing lightly against his arm once again. "You have demonstrated essence. Humanity is small, yet powerful in ways the universe has not fully appreciated. Your presence here marks the beginning of a new understanding, a new alliance. Trust, observation, and courage will guide the days ahead. You and your people have a place in this galaxy." Humans had survived against the odds for centuries, often underestimated, often overlooked. Now they were being seen for what they truly were: capable, resilient, and indispensable. That evening, as Kale walked through the palace gardens, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Each test, each observation, and each challenge had revealed the strengths of his species. Humans were small, yes, but they possessed qualities that could endure where even the most advanced civilizations might falter. They thrived on adaptability, creativity, intuition, and moral judgment. And in the recognition of the queen, these qualities had finally been seen, understood, and respected. A quiet hum of energy filled the gardens, and Kale paused near a crystal fountain. Its waters glowed faintly, reflecting the light of distant suns. He knelt briefly, tracing the patterns of flow with his fingers. The movement of the water mirrored the essence of humanity itself: dynamic, adaptable, resilient, and capable of influencing the world around it. The queen approached quietly, her hand brushing his once more. "You have done well," she said softly. "Today, humanity has proven its worth. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but you now have the foundation of trust, recognition, and opportunity. The spark of your people shines clearly." And above all, he had demonstrated the qualities that defined humanity. His species, small and often underestimated, had been seen for what it truly was. The stars outside the palace shimmered faintly in the night sky, and Kale realized that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges, rival factions, and unknown threats. Yet humans had endured before, and they would endure again. Observation, intuition, creativity, courage, and moral judgment, they were the essence of his people, and they had been recognized. Kale felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. Humanity's spark was no longer hidden. It had been acknowledged by one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. And with that recognition came opportunity, responsibility, and the promise of a new chapter. As the palace lights dimmed and the night deepened, Kale looked out over the city. The journey ahead would be long, full of tests and challenges, but he was ready. Humans had survived against impossible odds for centuries. They had adapted, created, and endured. And now, standing in the heart of an alien empire, Kale knew that their spark would shine brighter than ever. The queen's touch, her words, and her recognition had said it all. Humanity had a place among the stars, and Kale would ensure that their light, small yet resilient, would not be forgotten. The legacy of his species was just beginning to unfold, and he would be at the center of it, observing, adapting, leading, and enduring as humans always had. The palace seemed to hum with quiet approval, as if the universe itself acknowledged what had occurred. Kale allowed himself a small smile. Humans were small, fragile, and imperfect, but they endured. They adapted. They thrived. And now they had been seen, and in that recognition lay the promise of a future as bright and enduring as the stars themselves. Kale turned back to the Queen, her gaze steady and approving. Together they would face the challenges ahead, blending human insight with alien wisdom. Together they would show the galaxy that greatness was not measured in size or power alone, but in courage, perception, adaptability, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. And as the night stretched across the palace, Kale knew one truth above all. Humanity had finally claimed its place among the stars.